Welcome to Connecting to Admired Leadership, where twice a month we explore the behaviors and routines that make great leaders extraordinary. I'm Wes Bender, and I have the distinct pleasure of hosting some of our firm's partners, coaches, and clients to discuss leadership in ways you won't hear anywhere else. Let's dive into this episode and make people and situations better together. So we're very excited to have Carolynne back with us for today's webinar. And the topic I am especially keen on. I have some very anxious folks in my life right now, I feel like. I won't name whether that's in the professional bucket of my life, the personal bucket in my life, or maybe some volunteer leadership that I've agreed to at the end of the year with my kids' middle school. I won't say which one of those it is. But anxious folks nonetheless, and I assume there's folks on the call at the end of this time of year, moving into the summer. Maybe there's some uncertainty and some anxiousness as well. It's my belief that that anxiousness, those folks are leading themselves from a place of fear and a place of the unknown, of uncertain, rather than a place of enthusiasm of what could be. So I was rereading this field note. I'm actually going to drop. So Carolynne has chosen this particular field note to talk about today. I'm going to drop in the chat box a link for those of you who may not be receiving our daily field notes. These are great practical nuggets that come out every day. The one we're going to be talking about today comes from January 26th of earlier this year. So Carolynne, if you would introduce yourself to the fine folks on the webinar today, and also if you would share with us, why did you choose this particular topic as one you think would be really good to discuss and one that may really resonate with people?
Sure, that's great. Hi, Wes, and thank you. We should have a beer sometime and talk about why you've chosen to lead your PTO.
Oh,
Seems
yes.
like an interesting choice.
We should probably have lots of beers and discuss that. Yeah, that's right.
And hi, everyone else. I see some familiar names in the participant list, so it's great to be here and appreciate Wes you asking. Carolynne Thomas, I've been around the firm for a very long time, partner at the firm and specialize in leadership and communication, which is really what we do across all of our firm. And this field note struck a chord because I started at the firm in 2001, January of 2001, and this topic of uncertainty and leading through uncertainty has been a constant my entire time at the firm. So it has been, whether we're helping organizations going through a challenging time financially, or organizations who are introducing a new strategy, or organizations who are announcing a large new project or a new initiative, there's always some uncertainty that comes with all of those situations. Leadership changes. I mean, you can think of any topic across an organizational reality, and chances are there's uncertainty involved in it. And the challenge is, well, there's a few different challenges involved in it, right? One is most leaders don't want to misspeak. We don't want to say something that is not true, not certain, or something that we have to retract later. And so as a result, we oftentimes will actually not proactively lead during times of uncertainty because we don't want to misstep. Yeah. So with that, then sometimes there's an information vacuum.
And so leaders, hang on one second, Carol. Let me re-articulate that for everybody because that's so important. You're saying we find that leaders will often choose not to lead as the better option than potentially leading and taking a misstep. Would that be true in that?
Yeah, and some people may replace the word lead with communicate. Okay. But either way, good. we're not out there. And in some cases, we'll kind of joke with people that they're hiding. They're like hiding in their office because they don't want to say the wrong thing. Yeah. So with that then comes this information vacuum. And, look, there's this old maxim of interpersonal communication that you cannot not communicate. Everything you do sends a message. And in the absence of information, so I'm not communicating, but I'm not communicating. And so I'm still sending a message. And what happens is we make stuff up. and it's almost always worse than the reality.
Mm-hmm.
And what we
Mm-hmm.
do as human beings is we connect unrelated pieces of information and make up stories. And so it's just this natural way that we as humans make sense of reality is we say, oh, so what does not happen? What doesn't happen is a team is like, the whole leadership team is in Scottsdale right now at a 3-day offsite. I have no idea what they're talking about, but I know our stock price is down a little bit, and that must mean that we're gonna like hire 400 people. That's not what happens. The opposite happens. They're in Scottsdale, stock price is down, we're laying off 20% of the population when they have no basis for that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so this is the challenge is we're worried about misspeaking or misstepping. And so we hold back. And then as a result, people will make up things that aren't actually true. And that can have all sorts of other follow-on negative effects, which we don't have happen either.
Hmm.
So it's a bit of a dilemma.
Yeah.
It's more of a problem to solve than a dilemma to manage, but still it's a bit tricky because there's lots of times when we don't have all the information.
Yeah.
And so
So,
then what do you do?
all right, so let me recap a couple things. You said a lot of really cool nuggets there, and I also just noticed that I had not opened the chat box yet, so that's my fault. So I have opened the chat box now. We'd love to know who you are, where you're from. You can drop that in. Of course, the chat box is a great way to network with some other folks that are on the call too. If you have any comments or questions throughout, you can drop that in the chat box or the Q&A as well. So apologies, I forgot to open that up. But the other thing, I love what you said is you're always communicating a message. You're always communicating a message, and you can't hide behind the fact that, well, I haven't said anything, so I haven't said anything wrong. You're always communicating a message. And I think it's important for our listeners. In fact, I don't know that we've ever said this on any of these webinars. Our firm, CRA Admired Leadership, actually has three different practices associated with it. There's a strategic communications practice, there's a leadership practice, and a talent practice, among other things we do. And it's awesome, Carolynne, to hear you talk about leadership, but pull in a lot of things we know about strategic communications in this particular area of leadership. So there's a lot of case studies and things that are out there in relation to that too. So I dig into the practical nature of this then. So in times of uncertainty, I'm there. If there's not any communication coming to me, I've got my communication bucket and I'm filling it right from anywhere and everywhere I can find. And I'm filling mine up very differently than my colleague is filling their up with. What can the leader do to ensure in a time of uncertainty where we may not have all the information? Let's dig into some of the practicality of it. What should a leader be doing in relation to communicating honestly during times of uncertainty?
Yeah, so thanks for that. So I really think it comes down to how do you want to shape perceptions of your credibility and shape your level of trust with your team.
Mm,
So if you're like, look, I want to really like be on my front foot, even if I don't know everything, and I want to use this as an opportunity to build trust, then you're going to create some transparency that may feel a little uncomfortable. Now, what do we not want you to do? We do not want you to speculate.
mhm,
We don't want you to disclose anything that you're not ready for people to act on just yet, which I think is an important distinction as well. Because, there are times when we're not ready to say something just yet because maybe it's not 100% baked, or because, you know, we want people to stay focused right now. And so we don't want them to be distracted by something that could potentially distract them. So first step that I encourage all leaders to do is get in a room with your team, whatever team makes sense at the senior most level that makes sense to convene them. Take the topic, and I want you to pick 6 categories. So this is slightly different from what's in the field note. What's in the field note is how I want you to express it back to your team. But the first step is convene the people who are in the know and get clear and aligned on the details. So I want you to think about whatever the topic is and consider every question that people might have on their mind and categorize the responses in terms of these 5 areas. First, what is definitely going to happen? Like, we know this is definitely going to happen. Second, it's probably going to happen. Third, we just do not know yet. Fourth, what probably won't happen. And then fifth, what definitely won't happen. And I want you to just do a whiteboard session or whatever you need to get. So take whatever the topic is, all the questions, and categorize how you would answer those in one of those 5 categories. What will happen is
I say
you
those
will,
one more time because
oh,
I'm dropping those in the chat box. So tell them one more
definitely
time. What is
will,
definitely
probably
going to happen? What's
will, don't know, probably won't, definitely won't.
got it?
Because what will happen is, but through that exercise, you will surface areas where you're not aligned across your team.
That's
So you may say, this is definitely going to happen. And one of your counterparts may be like, oh, no, 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 we do not know that yet. Like so it's helpful to have that step in the process before you go out so that you can make sure that you guys are going to be aligned.
wow. What a great exercise.
Yeah, and the thing is you may never do anything with that information. You may just
Yeah.
say, okay, we're aligned now, great. And then you just go out and answer questions. So that's one option. Another option is to then say, use the framework that's in the field note and say, okay, well, based on that conversation we just had, now let's talk about what do we know right now that we're comfortable sharing? What do we not know? Or what's still uncertain? And get some clarity across the team of what everybody's comfortable talking about at that moment in time. Because again, some of this is about, you also don't want, like, pretend it's a large organization and it's your executive team having the conversation. You don't want like the CFO talk. This is actually something that happens inside one of my clients all the time. The CFO is highly transparent. He's out in front. He's holding regular conversations with his whole finance organization. This is a 150,000 person organization. The finance group is pretty big. He's the only one on their executive team who does that. So the finance team always is in the know. They're always telling everybody else what's happening. And that creates other issues across the rest of the executive team. So having the alignment conversation and then, getting some clarity on, okay, how are we going to go out and start talking about this is also helpful. Not necessary, but helpful. But then I think, the framework in the field note helps you structure the conversation you would then have with your team. Once you get clarity and alignment on the facts, then going out and saying, okay, here's what we know, here's what we don't know. But let's, make sure that I'm clear about how you stay focused right now. And I'm here to answer your questions. Like having that as a structure for your conversation, I think is very helpful. Because the interesting thing that we found is when, during times of uncertainty, it can be, you said it at the beginning, it can be a little scary for people, right? And it can create some anxiety. And sometimes that's not, this is the weird, psychological side of things. Sometimes that's not a bad thing, especially if bad news is coming. People having low expectations isn't always terrible, but you want them to be able to stay focused. And so just having fear and anxiety without having something to do about it is a recipe for churn and swirl.
Yeah.
And so if you can create clarity and then help them stay focused, even if there's some bad news coming, at least they know kind of what they have control over. And having some sense of control is a huge deal for most people inside of organizations.
So here's what's fascinating to me when I read through the field note and hear you talk, and I had never heard that framework of those 5 questions to ask in times of uncertainty too. That's so good. Can you speak to this idea that a lot of times leaders think clarity is having the answers and communicating the answers, but you can actually get clarity maybe sometimes if you don't have all the answers just from going through and kind of having the 6-step recipe. Would that be true? That equating clarity and communicating with clarity isn't necessarily just having all the answers to everything all the time.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that clarity is what do we know and don't know right now. And there's an important piece in the field note about committing to when you'll come back to people that I think helps to maintain the clarity. So this, not to get into too deep of the weeds, but so if there's a high degree of uncertainty, high degree, like there's something, everybody's expecting something bad to happen, you're going to need to actually go out and update people more often.
Yeah.
than if it's something's uncertain, but it's not going to personally affect me, or I'm not anxious about it. So the clarity, I think, comes from saying, here's what we know today. I'm going to come back to you if it's super unclear or very uncertain time. I'm going to come back to you in a week. I'm going to give you weekly updates, even when there is no new information.
Mm-hmm.
Because the higher degree of uncertainty, the shorter time frame you have before people start making stuff up again. And so, so if it's a highly uncertain time, I would say you go back to your team every week and say, here's what I know, here's what I don't know. Or this is what I shared with you last week, nothing's changed. But you have to go to that step to maintain that clarity.
Yep.
Because otherwise people will be like, a week's gone by, they've been meeting every day, something's going on, they decided something and haven't told us yet.
There's an equation somewhere that says the level of uncertainty somehow correlates to the cadence, the frequency of cadence that I need to communicate clearly along the way.
So
Okay. So you mentioned one particular client that you have in the CFO and how well they communicate, but it actually creates a stir or tension because some of the other areas of the organization may not be. Any other? I know we have lots of case studies related to this. Could you share just a little bit, any other kind of case studies of how does this play out when we're coaching and we're advising and we're consulting on this particular area? What are some other things that come to mind just to kind of give some good case studies and impact stories for folks?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and there's a question in the chat I'll come back to after this. There's, the other thing that, has been a constant during my time at the firm is talking about change. And most people kind of recoil when they hear the word change anymore, because we've programmed people to resist, and we've programmed people to think, I can wait this out, or this too shall pass, or think of all the reasons why people just opt out of whatever the change is that's coming. And so oftentimes when we are coaching program sponsors or somebody who is leading a large scale project or program across an organization, that exercise that I talked through, we will do at the beginning of the project, and then we will revisit it almost every single month to say, okay, what's changed? Let's go through these, what will happen, won't happen. We don't know, probably will, probably won't, and update anything that we know and share that back with the team. And so there was a project that a couple of us were heavily involved in a long time ago, where one of our clients was changing their profit sharing plan. It was pretty significant. They still had a profit sharing plan, A, and B, it was so rich that people would join their organization at a lower salary because their compensation was ultimately going to be higher because of this profit sharing. The problem was it was going to bankrupt the company if they didn't change it. And so we became their consultant to help them figure out how to help the organization navigate through it. We didn't decide what the new plan was going to be, but we helped them figure out how to, lead during it. And they said to us, we don't want employee engagement to suffer. We're like, okay, you're going to lower people's compensation over time, and you don't want engagement to suffer. Thanks for that challenge. But we were able to pull it off, and we were able to pull it off for two reasons. One, when you're, there's this idea related to, if I'm gonna, something like that, that's so personal, it's gonna change for me, I wanna know that I was involved, or somebody like me was involved in the decision and ultimately what the outcome was gonna be. So we designed a whole involvement process around it. And we were very, very upfront and transparent on the communication, to the point where they wanted to announce the decision, and then, they were going to announce it without doing any of the involvement. And we said, you need to delay the decision by 6 months so we can bring the organization along and help them understand what's happening. And one of the ways we did that was by saying, we don't know what's going to happen right now. We don't know what's going to happen yet. We want to involve you in the process. Here's what we know, and here's what we don't know. And as a result of that, they didn't lose any of their high performers because they knew we were being transparent. They knew the CEO was not shying away from things. He was addressing everything head on. He was treating them. One of the principles that we hope clients will adopt is to treat your employees like fully formed adults. and not to
Hmm.
treat them like kids that you have to like dole out information. No, he was very straightforward and honest with them. And that framework was really one of the core ways that he was able to do that because he didn't know how exactly they were going to do it just yet because he wanted to involve them. But that actually increased the uncertainty. But because
Hmm.
of his transparency and his candor, it all worked out.
Yep. So you kind of answered one of the questions that was in the chat box as well. I don't know if you saw that
Yeah.
in regards to the the emphasis in a lot of cultures today in businesses is to do everything you can to retain those top performers and then almost, set them apart from everybody else to make sure they feel great. Any other thoughts as it relates to communicating with top performers in general? How businesses are retaining and everything. I think that's very relevant, even outside of times of uncertainty and everything. Any thoughts related to that?
I mean, this is going to sound like I'm supposed to say this, but for anyone who has followed us for any length of time, to me, fanness is and
Mhm,
being a fan of those people and
mhm,
having them feel like they have a bind with you as their leader and they're committed to you. To me, like if you can do that all the time,
mhm,
then when there's a high degree of uncertainty or change, it doesn't affect a whole lot for them. Now, there could be some organizational realities that make it challenging for them. But to me, when it comes to your high performers, you know, I think it's really important to show your fanness to them as much as you're showing your fanness
mhm,
to anybody else, because that relationship is going to be what keeps them there. Now, we talk a lot about when we talk about cultivating a team of leaders, forging a team of leaders, also about the fact that at the end of the day, everyone needs to live by the same rules.
mhm,
That doesn't mean that you don't give special treatment to your high performers too.
mhm,
So
mhm,
there's some standards that should be consistent across the team, but you should also, with that performance, with that, the work that they're doing, they should also get some reward for that. And some of that is extra time with their leader, extra things. And Kit, I am saying fanness. Wes, maybe we could
Great
drop.
question, Kit.
Sorry.
Yeah,
You've been followed us for a long time. Yeah.
yeah. So
Go ahead.
let me articulate real quick this concept of fanness. That's exactly Kit is exactly what Carolyn is saying there. And then Carolyn, I just think kind of we've only got about 5 minutes left, and I want you to kind of share. I think it sounds like we've got some people on the call who obviously are on because they're looking at uncertainty or they're leading in uncertainty or they're figuring out communication. So if you'll just think, what's a 2 minute nugget that you would really give that really that works in some way. So just kind of some kind of closing piece to give everybody that you think would be real good and very practical. Well, I kind of articulate this idea of fanness. So fanness, in a lot of ways, is this, and I got this from one of our other partners recently, who we did an event together. And basically, she articulated that a lot of times we show our appreciation for folks, and we do that by consequences and rewards. We do it by a lot of extrinsic motivation, if you will. The idea of fanness is truly bringing yourself to a point where you say, I am a fan of this person, that I want them to succeed. And then you incorporate some behaviors that show that you are a fan. Not that you just want them to do something because it benefits you or it benefits the organization, that you truly are a fan of them. We have some admired leader behaviors, and again, our admired leader behaviors are small, practical things that can be explained in less than 5 minutes. They're universal across the board and they're immediately actionable. We have some unique behaviors that we've seen other leaders do that show I am a fan of you. And what fanness or these kind of admired leader behaviors do is they stir intrinsic motivation in people. They get them to stick around and do things they never normally would have known they could or the organization knew was possible. And so this idea of fanness and what Carolyn's saying crosses over times of uncertainty, crosses over all across the board as it relates to top performers for sure. That if you approach them and they know you're their biggest fan, that's different than just times where they're, you may not be able to give them as much money or those kind of extrinsic rewards or consequences that we have too. All right. With that said, Carolynne, last thoughts for this times of uncertainty. We opened up several cans of worms, I feel like, throughout our time, which we could have lots of different conversations about, but anything in particular come to mind that we could give folks as a practical nugget?
So just one other thing on fanness. The way I think about it is it's the professional translation of unconditional love. Because
Ooh,
the
how have I never heard you say that before? I love
I don't know,
that.
we need to spend more time together, Wes. Because the trick about fanness is that it doesn't change whether you're winning or losing, when somebody's doing well or they're not doing well. Oftentimes we shy away from people when their performance dips, but not somebody who's a diehard fan, not somebody
Mhm.
who unconditionally loves their child or their sister or the person on their team. So it's an interesting, it's the way I think about it and the way that really hits home for me. But so times of uncertainty, main thing is think about like, what do I do to build my trust and credibility right now? You do that through transparency, as much transparency as you're comfortable with, and through cadence. So
Mm,
I love what you said earlier, Wes, the higher the degree of uncertainty, the higher degree of cadence. So just enough transparency, regular communication back to the team and the organization, and think about, what we know and what we don't know. If you just break it down into that, and I love this idea of treating people like fully formed adults, you will have a much different conversation than if you're worried about saying the wrong thing. And I think too often we over-index on we don't want to say the wrong thing.
mhm,
The other thing that you can do is caveat what you're going to say to people by saying, look, we don't know everything that's going to happen yet. And we reserve the right to get smarter and change course as we go.
mm,
But I can guarantee you, we will not compromise. Insert your most important value.
mhm.
So we don't know everything's going to happen yet. We reserve the right to get smarter and change course along the way. But I can tell you, we will definitely not compromise our quality, compromise our relationships, compromise our service, whatever your most important value is. Using those talking points helps give you air cover if you do say something that ends up not being true.
Ooh, that's so good. Uh, I am always amazed. I've been doing these for over a year now, and I always get a new nugget of information as we talk about these things. The research and literature is clear on how leaders get better, engage with practical content, actionable content that you can implement immediately and have conversation around that content. That conversation galvanizes so it really becomes part of our leadership acumen, becomes part of the rhythm and culture of who we are. When we walk into a room, we're not having to look back at a workbook or a book or something. Our leadership becomes more natural in that way. Of course, we are always on the hunt for folks who find this, who resonate with this type of leadership development. Very practical, very simple, but very transformational at the same time. I dropped some additional links in the chat box. We are going to be all over the nation the rest of this year, all over the United States with different events. So you can check those out at those events. We do these webinars, of course, twice every month. And if you're not a subscriber to our field notes, would highly encourage you to do that. There's some great nuggets that come out. We have some foundational videos that are free to everybody, also give you a little bit of a taste of the content we have in an online platform. And then also, if you'd like to schedule a meeting for some additional follow-up conversation, I have the greatest job in the world, and that is I get to chat with folks all over the world in regards to leadership development. Would love to chat with you as well. Carolynne, as always, I learn new nuggets, and that's always especially true when you're on with me as well. So thank you so much for the time. Thank you, everyone. Carolynne, any final words?
No, thanks to everybody. And, don't hide in your office. There's my final parting words for you.
Ooh, solid. I like it.
Or in
Everybody have a great
behind
rest
your
of
Zoom camera.
Everybody have a great rest of the day, week, and your month of May. Cheers.